I always tell people my cancer in some ways was really kind of a blessing because I tackle life a lot differently now.
Welcome to the What Up Doc University podcast, your number one resource for total body wellness. Here's your host, Dr. Mike.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the What Up Doc University podcast. This is Dr. Mike coming back with another great episode. And today we're going to do another one of those stories for you guys. And like we did before, we had a story, a journey back to health. And I like to do these journeys back to health to give you guys kind of like a perspective of if you're going through some health challenges or a loved one, friend going through a health challenge, to see that there is some type of light at the end of the tunnel and give you guys some hope. And maybe you guys can relate to this, and maybe you guys can take some of the information that will be shared in this episode for your own health benefit or for the benefit of another. And today we have a special guest. Kim is a trooper. I've seen her story from when she was diagnosed and going through her treatments and all of that. And I won't give away too much of that. I'll let her talk about that. But I wanted to bring her on just to show you guys that getting your health back is possible. So I won't go further into that. I'll let her do all the sharing with that. So I'd like to welcome Kim. Kim, how are you doing today?
Hi, Dr. Mike. I'm doing great.
So,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for taking your time out to share with us. Sure. So let's start here. I want you to start from the moment that you got your diagnosis. Take us back to that point and the mindset, you got the diagnosis, and what were you feeling then?
Right. So I was 41 at the time.
Okay.
And I'd gone into the emergency room one night because I was just having some abdominal pain, and they did a CT scan and found a tumor that was the size of a basketball on my ovary.
Oh my!
And so at that time, they weren't certain that it was cancer. In fact, they thought it was a fibroid because on the CT scan it looked very fluidous. It was fluid that they could tell. So I obviously had to go in to have surgery to have it removed, and they wouldn't be able to know if it was cancer until after the surgery. So they did indeed go in and remove what they thought was going to be a fibroid, and it turned out to be stage 3 ovarian cancer. And so I woke up from surgery being told you had stage 3 ovarian cancer, and by the way, we had to do a complete hysterectomy. So they removed my entire reproductive system, including my omentum, which is, I guess, this lining that goes around my abdomen. Mm-hmm. They kind of clean you out, kind of carve you out like a pumpkin, because ovarian cancer has such a high reoccurrence rate. They don't want it to come back and attach to anything else. So they took it all. So when I woke up to that news, it was incredibly jarring. One, because I'm 41, I'd never had children. So I knew in that moment I was never going to have children. I am an actress and a director and a producer. So I also knew I was going to have to go through some chemotherapy because it was cancer we were dealing with. So I knew I was going to lose my hair. I knew I was going to be thrust into menopause instantly. So it was a lot to take on at once.
So were you having any type of symptoms prior?
Yeah. So the symptom that I noticed the most was that I was bloated. I was in really good shape. I was thin, but my abdomen, it looked kind of like I was pregnant. And
okay.
I kept ignoring it, really. And I didn't go in and have it looked at.
Yeah.
Until, like I said, I started to have pain. And the pain was because this, the the tumor was pushing on all my other organs. All my other organs were being pushed out of the way because this thing was growing. And what was so what is most interesting, I guess, about what they found was that, and what we're probably going to talk about a little bit is that because I had made a decision um, shortly before I found the tumor to start taking some different measures in my health and
Mm.
wellness, as far as I started pursuing an alkaline diet, just doing more of a whole food diet, trying to take better care of myself. So when they found the tumor, the cancer itself was actually not that big, but there was this giant bag of fluid that had surrounded it. So that's what was so large. And that's what they were seeing on the CT scan. And I had done so much research on alkalinity. And one of the things that I had found was that cancer cells tend not to thrive when you have an alkaline environment and a pH, when your pH is balanced and you have an alkaline environment in your body. So I tend to feel like those choices I made probably saved my life, because that cancer was completely trapped. It didn't get into my lymphatic system. Wasn't able to spread because for whatever reason, that ball of fluid had grown around it and kind of trapped it. So I feel like I had made some choices that maybe saved my life.
Yeah, yeah. And Kim's talking about there's actually been studies that have shown that changes in the extracellular fluid matrix, that you can change the pH level and it will actually stop the metastasis of tumor growths. There have been studies, and I'll link to that actually in the show notes. And I think I talked about that in one of the podcast episodes where I talked about pH. Um, but now, so you get this diagnosis.
Right.
It's obviously it's life altering, and you're sitting there. Well, you've gone through the surgery. You wake up from it. Now, what's going through your mind at this point? Are you worried, or are you scared? What's going through your mind when I guess the doc is basically giving you your options? What's going through your mind at this point?
Right. Well, I think the thing that hit me the most was I remember him telling me that statistically speaking, I had a 25% chance of being alive 5 years from that day.
Okay.
So that wasn't fun to hear. Even though they had gotten the whole tumor out, they felt very good about everything.
Sure.
Statistically speaking, ovarian cancer, the mortality rate is like 74%. It's really high.
Yeah.
So because the reoccurrence is so common, so I don't know. I just remember it's kind of fight or flight kind of kicked in. I knew that those were not good odds, but nonetheless, there were still odds. And so I just knew that I had to really make some changes, for sure in how I was taking care of myself, but also just in how I was living life. I always tell people my cancer in some ways was really kind of a blessing, because I tackle life a lot differently now.
Mm. What were some of those changes that went through your mind?
Well, so one of the first things the doctor told me was they handed me some depression medication. They gave me a prescription for it. He said, "You're 41, you've never had kids, now you're gonna lose your hair. The statistics aren't good, so
Yeah, that's kind of depressing. Yeah.
They were like, today's a bad day for you, so here's some depression medication."
Okay.
So I took the prescription and I said, if I feel like I need it, I'll use it. But
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I could do it on my own holistically. If I could just by continuing to eat better and to implement some exercise as soon as I was recovered from the surgery.
Did you tell them that? Did you
I
tell?
did.
Oh, okay. And how was that received?
Yeah. Well, at the time he was like, well, he's like, if that works for you, go ahead. He said, but here's the prescription nonetheless.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he wasn't, they weren't real adamant about that. They did also give me a huge, when I started chemotherapy, they gave me a big thing of Percocet. So I had 80 pills of Percocet, which is a pretty heavy narcotic for pain, because when you go through chemo, you tend to get some pretty severe bone pain.
Yes, yes.
And so I love telling people I have 78 of those pills left. There were only 2 times that the pain was so bad that I felt I needed the narcotic. And and I'm not anti pharmaceuticals. I think in some situations they're great, but I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to manage so many of my symptoms just by what I ate, by drinking more water and flushing my system,
Mm.
by sleep. I
Ah,
think we underestimate what sleep does.
yes.
Really, I mean, my body needed to heal and fight. And so just by those things, I was really able to limit the pharmaceuticals and the drugs that they gave me during my whole chemo journey. So those were big ones. And then the other thing that I love sharing with people is just that the doctors assured me that I would probably, because I was going into menopause and because they had sliced through my abdomen,
Mm.
so my once flat stomach was no more. And they said, just be ready. You'll probably gain 20 to 30 pounds because that's just menopause.
Yeah.
And so I love telling people that I have put on about 6 pounds. And so I'm like, you know what? I'll take 6 pounds any day
Yeah.
over 20 to 30.
Yeah, yeah.
And that has been because, to a certain extent, your body just does change when you no longer have some of those hormones naturally. But just through diet and my exercise and nutrition, I have been able to really maintain exactly what I looked like before any of this happened, and how I feel is so I feel better after cancer than I did before.
You know, one thing I want to point out for our audience is, what Kim is saying here. She's talking about, because there's so many people, and I want to step back here. There's so many people that say, well, I've been giving this life altering diagnosis. I'm either going to go one way or the other. And there's some people that turn and they say, I'll never ever use any type of Western medical intervention. And then there's some that say, well, I'm only going to use Western medical intervention. And Kim's a prime example of finding that blend in between. It's knowing when to use the pharmaceuticals, knowing that the pharmaceuticals is there for emergent purposes, not necessarily a lifestyle. You don't make a lifestyle out of Percocet. You don't make a lifestyle out of chemotherapy and radiation, but you use it to the extent to help your body because the body can't do what it needs to do. So you're using these tools. And I know a lot of people they're going to be very adamant. They say, well, you never ever, and you can't, the thing with the body is you can't ever play absolutes, so, utilizing these things to just aid the body to the point that it can function better. And then utilizing, like what Kim's saying here, is diet and lifestyle. Now, with your diet and lifestyle, take us through, we'll start with, what was your chemotherapies? How many sessions did you do? And then what were you doing in between to kind of aid your body?
Right. So during the chemo I was pretty fortunate because they removed all of they were able to, remove all of the cancer. They did 4 rounds of chemotherapy.
Okay.
So it was more of a preventative thing. They wanted to make sure that, no loose cells
Sure.
freed themselves during the surgery. So they actually had given me an option. They said, if you don't want to do chemotherapy, you don't have to. We're pretty sure we got it all.
Mm-hmm.
But the doctor said, I recommend that we play better safe than sorry. So I did. During the chemo itself, chemo's not fun for sure.
Right.
It is, you deal with nausea. You, especially the first couple days afterwards, what I had was, they were about 6-hour infusions. So I'd go up to the hospital, they'd hook you up to a bunch of IV bags, and it's basically poison. It's poison that kills cancer, but it's poison that kills everything else.
Yeah.
So the thing they're doing with chemotherapy is with the pharmaceuticals, they are trying to find the balance between where they can kill the cancer but not kill you.
Yeah.
And so you really do, um, you're dealing with nausea, you're dealing with, your sleep gets disrupted. You don't sleep very well.
Hmm.
There's a steroid that they have to give you as well, when you're going through chemotherapy, for the first day or two, after each, infusion. So that keeps you awake. It's incredibly hard on your body. And mine was every 3 weeks.
Okay.
So that I had my infusions. Um, During those 3 weeks in between each infusion, I was just on a kind of a mad dash to try to build my body back up so that it was strong enough to take another hit. And I was really proud because my doctors, every time I'd come back, they'd do your blood work to make sure that you were, basically strong enough to handle another round. And they were always like, "My gosh," they were like, "Your blood work, everything just bounced back, just right away." And so they were like, "Whatever you're doing, little lady, keep it up." And so I was pretty fortunate with that. With the exception of some pain, a little nausea, fatigue. I definitely had some fatigue, but nothing compared to what I saw a lot of other people on that ward. Because you're up there with, gosh, there were probably 40 people up there, all hooked up to
Yeah,
machines,
yeah.
up to bags of, pharmaceuticals and chemo. And, um, and I just remember a lot of them being like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You look so good." And I was bouncing back so quickly. And I just remember thinking, gosh, it's just so much simpler than we think it is. It really is. It's just, um, the food that you're eating, and it's the sleep that you're getting, and it's the water that you're drinking, and it makes a much bigger difference than we give it credit for.
Yeah, I think we've come to this day and age where we look at science as being science and technology as being the ruler of our lives,
Right?
and we neglect what nature has put into place,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I think that's one of the really big things of what's leading us into this state of where we are. We see bioengineered foods, we see all of these prepackaged foods and sedentary lifestyles. All of this stuff is going against what nature has intended us to be, and it's no wonder why we're seeing such a rapid increase in all these chronic degenerative diseases.
Yep.
And you sitting there taking the approach of, hey, let's use what nature has given us so that we can have health, sitting around these other people who aren't doing that. And you're a walking example of, hey, let's use nature's medicine cabinet for my advantage. Now,
Yeah.
during this time, like what were you doing? Like what were some of the lifestyle changes that you made?
So after each chemo treatment, usually the first couple of days, I wasn't able to be very active. I was in bed,
Okay.
just because
Yeah, you're down and out.
yeah, it's bad. You don't feel so good. But usually after about 4 or 5 days after the chemo, each time I made sure I was walking. I couldn't really run because you get neuropathy in your hands
Mm-hmm.
and your
Okay.
feet. A lot of your nerves it kills your nerves
Yeah.
in your hands and feet. Um, and so I'd have to wait usually a few days before that would come back, but I'd make sure I was out walking. And I was making sure that was getting plenty of sleep. So if I was up getting active, I would be up and active for 3 or 4 hours, and then I would go and lay down. Even if I wasn't tired, I
Mm.
would make myself go and lay down because I just felt like my body needed me to be still to just to to just heal.
Yeah.
You know. So I was really good about naps, um, and water. I drank water like nobody's business because, I remember my doctor had said to me, he said, "I don't want you sharing a bathroom," because I had two roommates. He said, "I don't want your roommates sharing using your bathroom because in the first 2 or 3 days after each chemo treatment, he said my urine and just any fluids, like my glass that I would drink out of,
Yeah.
he said it's toxic to them.
Oh man.
I know. So he was like, so I was like, are you kidding me? They are infusing me with something that is toxic to everybody else. I was like, how is this good?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so needless to say, I drank a ton of water,
Okay.
because although it was, the chemo was necessary, me flushing it out was my job. And so I drank a ton of water, during my chemo. And then I had a supplemental system that I used. So I was getting in lots of calcium, magnesium, potassium, again, really making sure that, that I was trying to keep a real alkaline diet, which was hard because you lose your appetite when you're going through chemo. So I did a lot of smoothies, a
Okay.
lot of protein shakes to keep up my energy. I did a lot of greens. I did, a lot of wheatgrass shots as well. They
Okay.
taste disgusting, but they it was my way of getting my greens down because sometimes my appetite, it's hard to take food in sometimes. So, um, but I had to kind of force myself to feed my body, even if I wasn't hungry. Um, I really started to change my attitude from food being something that was a comfort and more of food being fuel.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
was. It was like I didn't want to, in the past, food was something that was a comfort to me. If I was depressed or if I was bored, it was food
Yeah.
that I would fill that with. And so after my cancer journey, I really realized that food is fuel. And so I had to be really careful about what kind of fuel I was putting into my body, I guess.
Sure.
So those were some of the biggest changes that I made.
Now, when you were doing these lifestyle changes, was there any type of pushback or the oncologist saying, "Well, I'm looking at the nutrients that you're taking. I don't want you to take whatever it is because that nutrient may counteract or negate the chemotherapy that we're giving you."
Yep. So I had, my doctor when I first had the surgery. Some of you will know just that, anesthesia itself will, make you constipated. Any pharmaceuticals can constipate you, and when you're getting it at that kind of a dosage, whether it's anesthesia or chemotherapy, it can constipate you. So while I was in the hospital, they weren't going to let me go home until. And I apologize if this is too much information. They weren't going to let me go home until I pooped.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I wasn't going and I wasn't going. And it was day 7 and I was used to taking a probiotic.
Yeah.
And when I went into surgery and everything, the doctor said, nope, no supplements, no probiotics,
Right.
none of your vitamins, none of your shakes,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, don't do it. And so I didn't. I stopped all of that when I went in for the surgery. And so here it was day 7 after my surgery, and I was like, I can't go home until I poop, and I can't poop unless you let me have my probiotic. And so, and they were like, well, and so finally the doctor, they did stool softeners, they did a suppository on me, and none of it was working. And so finally he was like, what is your probiotic? So I showed it to him, and I said, it's all natural. There's nothing that's will you please just look at it? So he took a look at it, looked at the ingredients, and he goes, oh, it's like, all right, if you think it'll work, try it. So I tried it, and sure enough, the next day I went. So he told me after that, he was like, look, he said, I showed him what I was doing. I showed him that it was basically, I was just whole food was my regimen.
Yeah.
And so, and he looked at it all, and he was pretty great. He said, my bottom line, Kim, is that he's like, I don't know what this is. So he said, I can't tell you yes, but he said, but I won't tell you no.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I appreciated that. He basically left it.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that that's always the case.
It's not.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, most oncologists that I deal with, They're always starting with no. They're always starting with everything that you're showing me is guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
And that's an unfortunate thing. And and sometimes I do agree with what they're saying, because there is some type of counter reactions with nutrients and drugs, but most of the times it's the opposite way around, where the drug is causing a nutrient interaction or depletion, and that's the thing. And when you're dealing with cases of with cancers and other debilitating degenerative diseases, there's another aspect of malpractice and all of that kind of stuff that they don't want to be diving into. So I don't blame a lot of the medical doctors for for erring on the side of caution there.
Yep.
Now, so you said you've had four sessions.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So after the 4 sessions are done, what do they recommend, and what
So
then?
after the 4 sessions, I had a clean bill of health, and this is something else I love telling people, because they were pretty astounded by this as well.
Yeah.
So every 3 months, I have to go back in, and they have to run blood work, check my CA-125 count, which
Sure.
is a marker they look for to see if if the cancer's coming back. So they do the blood test, they do the CT scans every 3 months. So after chemotherapy, typically a person's CA-125 count is at its lowest, because the chemo has killed anything foreign that was in your body is gone.
Right.
So CA-125 count is typically at its lowest. So for me, as long as your count is between 1 and 30, that's in the normal range. So after my chemo, my number was 15, which is really great.
Okay.
And he said, now just be ready. He said, when you come back, as you get back to normal life and you're living life and you're, eating food and going out and hitting McDonald's or doing what you do, he said, just know that this number may go up a little bit, but as long as it's under 30, you're fine. And he said, don't panic if it goes up a little bit. It's totally normal. So I said, okay, great. So then 3 months later, I go back in, and my CA-125 count continued to drop.
Mm.
And so I think it went from 15, then it was like 12, and then it was like 9. And then 3 months after that, it was like 8. And so he was like, well, you're a rock star. He's like, you're just a pinnacle of health. And I was so excited, because that was very rare. Then the holidays came. And at the holidays, I decided, you know what? I'm going to eat pie, and I'm going to have ice cream, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And so I went in for my CA-125 count after it was in January, and it had jumped up to 18.
Oh, wow.
So I panicked, and I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why did it jump up? And he said, Kim, it's normal. It's still in the normal range. And he goes, I don't know. What have you been doing the last couple months? And I was like, eating a bunch of crap. And he said, well, there you go. So it really just showed me what you put in your body.
Sure.
It's like I'm getting blood work every 3 months. And that was the big difference, was that I had just been eating pretty poorly because it was the holidays and I wasn't really washing myself. So yeah, that was kind of a eye opener for me.
So you've gone through all of that, and then now, so are you still getting 3-month checkups?
Nope. So I just graduated from my 3 month, and I am 2 years in remission, and I now have graduated to every 6 months. So for the next 3 years, I will continue to go in every 6 months, and they will check. And then once I hit the 5-year mark, they give me a mortality rate of 98%.
Wow.
So that is, I live life every day thinking it could come back. And so I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to live it to the fullest, but I'm going to take care of it as best I can. And by the same token, I'm waiting for that 5-year mark when when they tell me that I'm clear. Yeah.
So what's the numbers been like on these subsequent 6 month checkups?
Really good. Yeah, I have stayed completely. I think after that my holiday debacle, my numbers went back down. So I think my last one was back down to 13, which is very good. Um, yeah, everything's good. I've maintained my weight well. My hair has grown back. That was another thing they were really amazed by, was that typically after chemotherapy, people's hair will come back in a different color
Yes. Yeah.
or a different even consistency.
Mm-hmm.
It'll
Yeah.
be curlier,
Yeah.
and mine didn't. Mine has come in. It grows like a weed, and it has same exact color and thickness and everything as it was before my cancer. So they were really amazed by that because that's very rare.
Yeah.
Um, so again, I like to think it's because I'm taking pretty good care of myself, and I really do. I try to limit um, uh, anything that's not natural.
Yeah.
You know,
Now, as we kind of wrap this up, what would be your words to somebody who's going through the same situation that you went through? What would be, your advice and, your your guidance through the process?
right? Well, the first thing I would tell anybody who goes through that is your attitude is about 80% of it, I believe. I think if you take it as a death sentence, um, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
Mm,
You have to take that diagnosis and you have to see it as a challenge, and you have to see it as you know uh, it's a challenge to overcome
yeah.
and to come out better than you were before. It's a wake up call. It's a gift, really. So attitude first. Obviously, the making a choice. You have to choose to take care of your body. It's not always easy. It's certainly that society makes it really easy to eat bad food quick and cheap. And so I know to be healthy, it sometimes it's expensive to eat healthy. But it's a choice. What's really expensive is cancer. So
Yeah.
that's another thing I would tell somebody with that diagnosis is do what you need to do for your health aspect of it. And then the other thing I guess is reach out to, there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of support groups. There's people will rally around you. There's something about cancer. People rally around you and everybody wants to help you. And don't be the hero. Um, let people help you because it's
Yeah.
a hard thing to go through, especially alone. I'm not married. I didn't have kids, and so I'm so grateful for the community of friends and family and just support groups that there were that kind of walked with me through it. So I would say reach out to those people, let them help.
Yeah. That's yeah, I mean, you summed it up right there, and especially the support groups, I see people, and this can also, by the way, this can also work in a negative aspect too, because I see sometimes that families can also be a hindrance in their quest to be supportive.
Yes,
So within that is making sure, like Kim was saying, that the attitude should always be towards healing, towards health, towards positivity, rather than your support group being this, oh my gosh, I'm worried about you dying.
right,
That's the common thing that I see with patients coming in. Their family is just like their talk and their speech is always about, oh my gosh, I don't want so and so to die. I don't, and I'm like, okay, let's just focus on living one day at a time.
yep, yep,
Right? It's like let's just focus on the positive aspect rather than the
yep,
negative aspect. Even if they're going through chemotherapy or radiation, let's just focus on the healing benefits of that
right,
rather than, well, I'm going through this. I feel like, death and, it's killing my body. Let's switch that mindset, and you're absolutely right. That's like 80% of the battle right there is that mindset,
yep, that's right.
surrounding that. So, any last words you want to leave with the audience before we wrap this up?
You know, I guess I would say that there's there's a real cancer is not a death sentence so
Yeah.
much anymore.
Yes. Yes.
And I believe that yes, that people are surviving cancer more now because certainly there are medical strides that have been made, absolutely. But I think it's also because nowadays I think there's this whole thing about being a survivor, and so when someone gets that diagnosis, there really is people are seeking out holistic approaches to health, and I think that has a big part of why people are surviving it more or
Mm,
living longer at least than they used
yes.
to. Because there has been a real awakening toward there has to be a symbiotic relationship between medicine and the holistic approach, whether that's supplements and vitamins and chiropractic care and whatever it is, there needs to be that balance. And so I guess I'm excited to kind of be a part of that and to be able to kind of share that with people. That there are lots of options out there. Find the balance that works for you, and then survive.
There you have it, guys. Find that balance and survive. Kim, thank you so much for your time and
You bet.
for your energy and your mindset of wanting to survive because your story just adds another part in the cogwheel of allowing people to live, and giving them that hope. And hope is one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle that a lot of people lose.
Yeah.
And what I see in patients when if they have hope, they move forward. If they don't, they regress. And so we thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that with our audience.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Dr.
All
Mike.
right.